Welcome back to another story on Whispered Tales. Now, let's dive into today's story.
The wall-hung pendulum clock struck 7, 7 dry, hard knocks in the old tiled kitchen, each one like a small tap along my spine. I, Eleanor Hart, set the dish of beef stew on the table, steam lifting the smell of red wine, onion, and bay leaves. On the radio, a woman's voice sang a tune I couldn't name, that gentle BBC Home Service music spliced with a few lines about student protests somewhere in Paris and London. This decade is as loud and changeable as the sea. But here in number 17, Beechwood Street, everything seems to cling to the old grooves, the ones people call a mother's duty. David, my son, sat at the head of the table, his shirt unbuttoned 2 notches, as if the house were an office and I his personal secretary. Clara, his wife, adjusted her bouffant hair and left a thin, careless smile hanging. The smile of someone who's already won before the hand is dealt. Dorothy, my sister-in-law, bent to fold the napkins, avoiding every pair of eyes. Ella, my 17-year-old granddaughter, stayed quiet, her lips pressed shut as if guarding a secret no one allowed her to tell. Either you give Clara your room, or you make arrangements to move out. David's voice wasn't a suggestion. He barked it. In my own kitchen, at the moment I was setting the mashed potato spoon down. No one mentioned I'd carried him through whooping cough when he was 3. No one remembered I'd sat by the fire the night the war ended and didn't sleep until cockcrow. No one, least of all David, looked at me as a person. In the thin yellow light, his sentence fell straight to the tiled floor like a porcelain plate slipping a hand, shattering, shrill. David. Dorothy cleared her throat, her fingers trembling around the salt cellar. Mind your tone. I won't, he snapped, eyes not on me. I make the decisions. This house needs order. Clara's expecting. I'm not expecting, Clara said, that thin smile pulling 1 notch tighter. But I am tired of sleeping in the sitting room. Your mother's room, it's big, bright, with built-ins. Young people need space. Old people, David shrugged, need less. The stew turned bland at once, as if all its salt had rushed up into my throat. Heat from the oven pressed at the nape of my neck, and I, Eleanor, 69, a widow for 10 years, felt something in me break. Not sadness, not anger, clarity, a cold kind of light, like the winter sea at dawn, so flat you can see all the way to the horizon. I set the spoon down, very gently. I was afraid if I set it any harder, the dry clink of metal to china would shatter the fragile stillness I'd just found. All right, David. I said it so even I was startled by how even I sounded. I'll make arrangements. Silence. Thick as treacle. David looked wrong-footed, like a man who's spilled a tin of paint and doesn't know where to begin wiping. Clara let slip a short laugh, the sound of a knife tip on crystal. Dorothy swallowed. Ella lifted her face, eyes wide. I rose, folded my napkin into a neat square, and placed it by my plate as though I'd just ended an ordinary meal. No one told me to sit. No one stopped me. I walked the wooden hall, past the oak cabinet stacked with my husband's old papers. Arthur Hart, who had worked on aircraft during the war and taught me to knot a scarf as tidy as a mooring line. My bedroom looked onto the apple garden. On the dressing table, my mother's silver-lidded powder box, yellowed now, a wedding gift. I sat on the bed's edge and listened as the kitchen radio shifted to a bulletin about a lady MP speaking on women's rights. The world is learning how to pronounce the word respect. In my house, respect had just been pushed from the table like an extra chair. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I opened the drawer and took out the black leather notebook, what I call my book. A lifetime's figures from freelancing as a bookkeeper ran straight and small across squared paper. Money I'd earned after the war, after Arthur died. Money I'd saved by refusing new shoes each season, refusing the bath trip my friends coaxed me toward, refusing that new pressure cooker in the electrical shop on the high street. I pulled out a clipped classified from last week. Urgent sale, seaside cottage in Devon. 2 bedrooms, large kitchen, timber deck overlooking the bay. £3,200. The paper was a bit crumpled, with a smear of breakfast butter at the edge. Maeve, my friend from the village women's committee days, had pressed it into my hand over tea. When you've a minute, Ellie, ring them. You never know. I'd laughed then, thinking the dream as frivolous as the miniskirts on Carnaby Street. Now it wasn't. I lifted the pink telephone receiver, what Ella calls Granny's stylish phone. 11 digits, and at the other end a calm middle-aged man. Tilling and Sons Estate Office, good morning. I'd like to view the cottage in Budleigh Saltern. Today, 11 o'clock if possible. I heard a pin tapping. Mrs. Hart. He read my name off a client card. Perhaps Maeve had left mine from that time I asked about a house on the high road. Yes, 11. I set the phone down and looked at the clock. 7:30. 3.5 hours to turn the woman just expelled from her bedroom into the woman who drives out to view a new life. At 9, David came down with his hair a storm cloud. Is breakfast on? No. I kept my eyes on the list of documents to take to the bank. Savings book. The title showing number 17 is mine. The freehold Arthur used to stroke like a metal case. I'm going out, I added. A small snort. Don't be long. He said it as if to the maid. I went to the front room, the one Clara calls the drawing room that needs new curtains, and took my gray-green tweed coat. In the mirror, I saw a 69-year-old woman with a hard jaw and bright eyes. I thought of the ration queues after the war, the wet nights I kept books for the grocer, Arthur's hand weighty and warm. The woman in the glass was not weak. She had merely forgotten. At 10:30, I left the house. David sat enthroned in the armchair. Clara was still upstairs. No one asked where I was going. I opened the old wooden gate myself, apple leaves crackling underfoot. The number 7 bus took me to the station, then the train toward Devon. I sat by the window, purse clutched, watching fields fall away, green, gold, brown, like the pages of years being turned too quickly to read. The train reached Exmouth at 10:53. The agent, Mr. Tilling, waited with a cream Morris Minor. He opened the door for me as if I were a lady. I smiled. It had been a long time since anyone treated me as someone to be honored. The couple who own it are moving to Bristol to be near their daughter, he said as the car ran along the bay. Good light, afternoon sun. Floorboards a little worn but sound. The sea appeared, a calm strip of silver. Far off, small black dots of walkers. No one demanded anything of me. The cottage was just as advertised. 2 bedrooms, white-painted sash windows opening straight to the bay. A timber deck wide enough for a small round table and 2 chairs. I stepped into the kitchen and laid a hand on the scrubbed wooden worktop, edges polished by years of use. And I pictured a kettle singing, the smell of baking. I went out onto the deck. A salty breeze combed my hair. My coat snagged lightly on the rail. And I saw myself step out here every morning with tea and the paper, with no one calling Mum. How do you find it? Mr. Tilling asked, voice softened as if afraid to break something delicate. Perfect. Would you like a few days to think? He smiled, an urbane man used to last-minute wobbles. I turned and looked straight at him. I've been thinking for decades, Mr. Tilling. Today I'm buying. He blinked, then hurriedly opened his leather case and drew out the papers. The asking price is $3,200. The owners are prepared for immediate completion. I did the sum quickly. My savings are a little over $3,600. Every pound from ledgers balanced at night, from simpler suppers, from turned-in restitched coats. I signed the deposit without my hand shaking. You could be in within 72 hours if we press, he ventured. The 60s still love their paperwork, but paperwork will queue for those who are ready. Good. I'll be in within 72 hours. We shook hands. His palm was warm. I stepped onto the deck again and looked at the sea as if it were an answer. I took the little camera Ella had given me for my birthday and snapped the horizon. The print wasn't made yet, but the image was already clear in my mind. One line between sky and water, and a boundary I had just crossed. The return train ran slower. I wasn't restless. At the station, the evening papers shouted about equal pay for women. I thought about the price I'd just paid, not the $3,200, but the price of severance. Worth it. A woman's life sometimes needs only one moment to say, I reached home near 6. David watched television. Football commentary bled into the clatter of Clara rooting through the kitchen, my kitchen, as if resettling a conquered territory. He didn't look up. Where have you been? He said to the screen. Seeing to a few things. I hung my coat and went straight upstairs. My room, by David's decree last night, was now Clara's. I went to the guest room, opened the little wardrobe, and took out 2 large suitcases. Each lid lifted, and 40 years of living looked back at me. A black and white wedding photo, Arthur straight as a mast, me in a borrowed dress. A frame of David at 6 in the cardigan I'd knit, front teeth gone, grinning. The pocket watch Arthur bought at a street market the day he was demobbed. A woven throw I'd bought in the lakes 10 years ago, indigo faded. Tax ledgers, the house deeds, Maeve's hand-tilted letters. Ellie, if the day comes you want to go, I'll drive with you. I chose. I took only what is truly mine, not the things I've kept because I thought someone else would like to see them. Each piece lowered into the case like a small decision. I worked in silence. No music, no words. Below, David shouted at Clara about something on the telly. A glass rang in the sink. A chair scraped. The old life took one last bite before it loosened its jaw. At 10, David hollered from the foot of the stairs. Mom, you're not doing supper. No. Order in. I answered, my voice not an inch above necessary. Silence again. Then some mutters I no longer felt bound to hear. I kept folding blouses, setting ledgers, wrapping photographs in newsprint. Near midnight, I lay down on an unfamiliar bed, the bed in the guest room I would call mine for 3 more nights. I didn't fall asleep at once, but I didn't toss. In my head, Budley C. kept time. Next morning at 7, the telephone rang. I'd arranged it. Tilling and Sons estate office. A young woman's voice, secretary, no doubt. This is Hart. I'll come by to finish the deposit. And please tell the owners I'll have the transfer through within 2 days. Yes, Mrs. Hart. I set the receiver down, poured tea into the blue-glazed pot, and sipped. The tannin bite was familiar, but the aftertaste was strangely sweet, like freedom. At 9, David tramped into the kitchen again. Breakfast. I'm going out. Where now? My business. He yanked the icebox door and slammed it. Clara's been waiting for you to drive her to Marks and Spencer. I'm not free. I turned away before he could throw me a scowl. I didn't need it. I went to the front room for my coat and slid out the paper with my to-do list. Call the bank to confirm the transfer. Call Maeve. Are you free? Call Christine Rose, the solicitor from the Regents Park Walking Group. Book an appointment on the will and on selling number 17. Bookkeeping taught me one thing. Freedom needs paperwork, too. I stepped onto the front stoop. No one asked. The gate swung again. The apples crackled again. Today the wind carried a faint scent of rain. London in summer loves that. Overcast without sorrow. I walked with my back straight, each footfall feeling like my signature on the document of my own life. At the bank, the balding manager peered at me over horn rims. Mrs. Hart, you want to transfer $3,200? Yes. Your savings. He glanced down at the book, eyebrows lifting. I could hear the abacus behind his forehead. Woman, 69, a large sum. This decade still has its old grooves. I lifted my chin a fraction. It's my money. He smiled, courteous. Of course, madam. At noon, I rang May from a red phone box on the street. Ellie? You sound as if you've climbed a cliff and spread your arms to the wind. I bought the house. By the sea. A beat of silence. Then the lid pop of a kettle. Oh, Ellie. At last. Tell me everything. Where? And does David know? Not yet. I leaned my back to the glass and watched people pass. Minis, go-go boots, skinny ties on boys. I won't tell him until it's done. All right. What do you need me to do? Thursday, come with me to see Christine. I'm selling number 17. Ellie, Maeve paused, breathing steady. I've never been prouder of anyone. In the afternoon, I came home with a paper sack of odds and ends, new fountain pen, some envelopes, a coil of twine for boxes. David was in the front room. Clara was shifting chairs and laying down her faux Persian rug. Where have you been all morning? He asked sharply. I set the bag down and peeled off my gloves. Seeing to my affairs. Don't be mysterious like the ladies in your book club, Clara cut in, the thin smile back. Everyone here needs to know the plan. My plan doesn't concern you, I said, meeting her eyes. A short silence, no longer as treacly as last night. Perhaps because there was no longer room in me for treacle. I went straight upstairs, closed the door, and went on packing. Each folded cardigan, each ledger set in place made David's and Clara's shouts recede, like the voices on a quay after the ship has pulled away. That evening, when the house was quiet, I switched on the lamp. On the page, my plan came clear. Thursday, sign to sell number 17. Friday, send the essentials to storage. Sunday, move down to Devon. I wrote in blue ink, lines like small waves chasing each other to shore, patient and sure. I don't know whether at 69-1 is allowed to begin. But tonight, when I blew out the light, I understood. There is no allow. One signs one's own leave with the same calm voice I'd used at the table. I'll make arrangements. Downstairs, the pendulum clock struck 12. I closed my eyes and heard, very plainly, the rhythm of the sea 200 miles away, the rhythm that had just come back to me. And I smiled. Not Clara's thin cut of a smile, but the smile of someone who's stepped onto solid land after a long crossing, sees the lighthouse, and knows. This is my shore. Thursday morning, rain threaded down the window frame, fine as silver thread, falling evenly across the old, fogged glass. June in London rarely runs clear, but I felt strangely bright inside. Perhaps it was the mug of strong black tea I'd just finished. Perhaps it was simply that I was no longer afraid. The tweed coat hung ready behind the door. The suitcases were nearly packed. I was only waiting for Maeve's knock. Right on the dot of 9, her red Austin Mini pulled up at the gate. Waves in her hair, scarf tied Parisienne, eyes sparkling as if she were the one about to do something extraordinary, not me. "Ready, Ellie?" she shouted through the window, her voice blurred by the rain. "More than ready," I answered, shutting the door behind me without looking back. Number 17 closed with a long creak, a sound like a period dropping at the end of a long chapter. We drove down Finchley Road in silence for a while. On the radio, Mick Jagger's rasp, "Time is on my side." Maeve laughed. "Indeed, time's with us, at least for this morning." I laughed too, with a tightness in my chest. For decades, time had never been on my side. It always ran toward others, my husband, my son, my granddaughter, even strangers who needed me to balance their books, file their taxes, reconcile their slips. I had never imagined a day when time would turn, look me in the face, smile, and say, "Now it's your turn." Maeve glanced over. "Ellie, are you scared?" "I don't think so. Or if I am. The fear is mixed up with exhilaration, hard to tell one from the other. Feels like when I left my husband," she said with a grin. "Scared, and breathing for the first time." Her words made me think of Arthur, my husband. A good man, but he lived as if he were the whole world and I the rim that kept it from collapsing. He died and left me with a house, with a son used to being served. And I went on serving, as if the war had not ended and my duty had no armistice. Not anymore. Christine Rose's office sat in a red brick building near Baker Street. The place smelled of rain, old paper, and ink. Christine was about 50, thin, cropped hair, kind eyes under severity. She stood to greet me with a real smile. "Mrs. Hart, lovely to see you." We knew each other from the Regent's Park walking group. When I told her I needed legal advice, she'd said simply, "Come, and bring the hardest heart you own." I told her everything. The dinner, David's words, the seaside cottage, the decision to sell the house. Christine didn't interrupt. She only nodded now and then and made a few notes. Finally, she said, "You know, Eleanor, what you're doing will make the neighborhood buzz, but it's entirely lawful. The house is in your name. The money is yours, and your son cannot prevent you." "I'm not trying to prevent anyone, Christine. I just refuse to be treated like old furniture to be pushed aside." She nodded slowly. "Then do it decisively. I'll prepare the sale documents, and I also want you to review your will." I smiled wearily. "My will? Yes. Don't let them quarrel over your estate later. Leave it to the one who truly understands and respects you." I thought at once of Ella, my gentle granddaughter, whose gaze holds the light of a fellow soul rather than pity. "I know exactly who, Christine." We worked through the formalities. Her voice was even, steady. Each sentence set another paving stone beneath my feet. When I'd signed the authorization, I looked up to see Maeve waiting in the corridor, cradling a coffee cup, eyes alight as if to sing, "You've done it." And I had. We stopped for lunch at a small place on Marylebone High Street. The room was crowded, smoke mixing with strong coffee, a harmonica whining somewhere. I ordered herring sandwiches. Maeve had a meat pie. "How do you think David will react?" she asked. "I don't think," I said. "I know. He'll be angry. He'll say I've betrayed him. But you know, Maeve, sometimes being a traitor is the only honest way to be true to yourself." Maeve nodded. Classic Eleanor Hart. I laughed, my first unguarded laugh in months. A light shower began again beyond the window, but inside me a small flame burned. It had been a long time since I'd felt I was living instead of merely enduring. That afternoon I went home. The streets were wet, leaves shone like silk. I parked at the gate, and when I opened the door, the familiar hit me. Clara's cheap perfume, David's secret cigarettes, the pendulum clock's steady knock. But this time it didn't feel like home. Only an address counting down. David sat on the sofa, the Times open in front of him, but his eyes fixed on me. Where were you all morning? Out. Doing what? Private business. You're very secretive these days. Perhaps I've learned not everything needs telling to those who don't listen. His brow pinched. What's that supposed to mean? You understand perfectly. I went upstairs, leaving behind a look that mixed suspicion and irritation. I felt a flicker of pity for him, not because I was leaving, but because he didn't grasp what he was about to lose. 3 days later, the agent rang. Mrs. Hart, a young couple would like to buy number 17. They're very taken with it. Their offer, 3,500. I accept. A pause of surprise. You don't want to push them higher? No. I prefer leaving sooner to earning a few more pounds. And then everything began to move. I booked the removal men, rented storage, called the hauler. I did it all in silence. The old way women of my generation did most things, steadily, without asking for applause. Clara only noticed when she saw me folding blankets into the suitcase. What are you doing? Getting ready to go. Go where? To a place where no one orders me to swap rooms. Her eyes flared. Does David know about this? He will, when it matters. She pressed her lips, hands tightening on her apron. Unbelievable. A 69-year-old woman behaving like a girl running away from home. I met her eyes, a smile thin as a cold wind. Yes, a girl. A girl who's free for the first time. Clara said nothing more. She turned away. Her heels hammered the boards like small stamps of fury. The day of the sale, the sun came out. Light fell through the pane and washed the paper white. I took the pen and signed, Eleanor Margaret Hart. Only 3 words, and a whole life inside them. The check for 3,500 lay calm on the desk, a ticket to liberty. I slipped it into my purse. My hands trembled a little, not from fear, but from happiness. Christine watched me with a gentle smile. You've just done what many women long for all their lives and never dare. I don't know if I should be happy. Be happy, Eleanor. From now on, every decision is yours. That afternoon when I got back, David was home. Clara was watering the porch pots. I stepped in, set my bag on the table, took off my gloves, and said, steady as a level, David, we need to talk. Yes. I've sold the house. The air froze. What? I said I've sold this house. You can't. This is my father's house. And your father left it to me. Clara came in from the porch, pale. What about us? Where are we supposed to live? That's for the 2 of you to decide. David shouted. You can't do this. You have no right. I raised my head and looked him in the eye. I have every right, David. Because for the first time in my life, I'm using it. He stood there, then stepped back, lips shaking. You'll regret it. Perhaps. But if I do, it will be my own regret. I walked past him and up the stairs, each wooden tread creaking like notes of farewell. I knew that from now on there would be a wide space between us, the space of freedom, which not everyone can bear. That evening I sat in the front room with a cup of tea. Outside, the city stayed loud. Car horns, radios, children playing at the end of the lane. Inside me, a strange quiet. I opened my notebook and wrote the first line of my new life. Today, I, Eleanor Hart, did what no woman on this street has dared. Sold my house without asking permission. I put down the pen and leaned back. In that quiet, I heard my own voice whisper. The voice of the girl of 20 who wanted to learn to paint, who wanted to go to the sea. Late, Eleanor. But at least you've begun. Night fell, and as I was about to get into bed, there was a soft knock at the door. I opened it, Ella. She stood there with damp hair and a small bag clutched to her chest, worry in her eyes. Gran, Dad told me. Is it true you sold the house? True. I know he shouted at you, but... Gran, I'm glad. I looked at her, eyes clear as morning. Glad? What? Because you finally did what you want. Everyone deserves to live their own way, don't they? My throat tightened. I nodded and smiled a little. Yes. And never forget that, Ella. She hugged me hard. I never will. When the door closed behind her, I knew. I hadn't lost everything. I still had someone who understood me. And perhaps, one day, the whole world would, too. That evening, the London sky sank low, thick and black like velvet curtains. Rain began in heavy drops, then deepened into a sheet of water. Wind slid through cracks in the old frame, whispering like a choir of restless ghosts. The pendulum clock downstairs struck 9. Number 17 held its breath, waiting, for what? I didn't know. Perhaps for an ending, or a beginning. I stood before the mirror in the guest room, the room I'd called mine for these final nights. My tweed coat hung ready. The suitcases were tied with rough string. On the table lay an envelope, the signed sale contract, the transfer receipt, the draft of my new will that Christine had handed me that afternoon. The blue ink wasn't dry yet. Eleanor Margaret Hart shimmered on the page like a small boat leaving harbor, still wet from the tide. Then, the sound of a car outside. A door slam. Footsteps. David. He burst into the sitting room below. The front door banged open, wind and rain rushing in with him. Clara followed. Hair puffed, smile stretched thin to a line. Dorothy hovered in the hall, hat dripping, clutching her small handbag. And Ella stood half-hidden in the doorway, eyes too wide for her face. Mother! David's voice hurled up the staircase like a stone. We're talking now. I stepped into the hallway, one hand resting lightly on the banister. So do I. His gaze darted to the open door of my room, to the suitcases marked Devon. His eyes flared. Anger, yes, but fear too. You're not going anywhere, he said slowly, jaw clenched. I've spoken to a lawyer at work. He said I can stop the transfer if I prove you're no longer sound of mind. The air froze. I exhaled softly. You declare your own mother insane, David? If I must, he shot back, though his hand shook. You're making reckless decisions, destroying the family. Clara's voice slid in like a blade. Eleanor, no one wants it to come to that. But you are being unreasonable. We just need a home, at least until. Until what? I cut her off. Until you're comfortable again? Until you've claimed the kitchen, the money, and left respect for someone else to find outside. Rain hammered the window like a fist. Dorothy whispered, trembling, David, don't. You'll regret this. I won't, he snapped. She sold the house without a word. Did you even think of me? I've thought of you for 41 years, David, I said quietly. Each word fell like a slow step. Tonight, I'm thinking of me. He laughed, bitter. A 69-year-old woman chasing freedom. Ridiculous. If freedom is ridiculous, I said, then what's servitude? Clara huffed, turning to him. Tell her, David. Tell her if she goes, we'll. Do what? I asked sharp. Threaten me again? A flash split the sky, lightning widening the hallway. For an instant, we were shadows cut from paper. A mother standing tall, a son trembling with rage, a young wife hard as glass, a sister-in-law shrinking, and one small light. Ella, where hope lived. David tried again, quieter now. If you insist on Devon, fine. But you won't sell. Let us stay. Rent it to us. Share the title. No. Lower the rent. No. Add me as co-owner. No. Each no clicked like a lock snapping shut. Why, he growled. Why be so selfish? Because if I don't protect myself, no one will, I said, turning toward him. Because I know too well what happens when I say all right one more time. But I'm your son. Yes. And you've forgotten I'm a person. A crash outside, the wind knocking something down. Dorothy flinched as if praying words might not wound so hard. But 1968 London was learning to listen to hard truths. And tonight, so would this house. Ella took a step forward, hand gripping the rail. Dad, go to your room. David barked. Let her stay, I said. She should hear grown-ups tell the truth. Ella looked at me, grateful. I faced David again. Do you remember when you were 6 and had whooping cough? I sat up 3 nights straight. When you were 18 and cut your hand on the neighbor's window, I wrapped it with my only good handkerchief. When you married Clara, I emptied my savings for the wedding. Do you remember? Are you keeping score? He sneered. No, I said. I'm reminding you. For 41 years, you've mistaken love for entitlement. Now you'll learn what respect feels like, and you won't like it. Utter nonsense. Clara snapped, spinning away. I don't have to listen to this. Clara. Dorothy's voice, sharp for once. Be quiet. Something cracked. A sound from the stairs, or perhaps in our hearts. David stepped closer until we stood level. Fine. You sell the house, you leave tonight. I don't want you here another minute. Dorothy gasped. David, I met his stare. That sentence will echo back to you someday. And I nodded. All right. Tonight. Eleanor. Dorothy cried. It's storming. Wait till morning. No, my calm surprised even me. My son just repeated the choice he gave me at dinner. Give up the room or leave. He needs to see someone listen and act. Ella darted down 2 steps, eyes shining with tears. Grandma, you don't have to. I don't have to anything, I said, resting a hand on her shoulder. I choose to. Remember that word, love. Choose. A sudden knock rattled the door. Maeve, soaked to the bone, scarf dark with rain, eyes alight. I caught wind of it from the phone box. Ellie, my car's out front. If you're going for a night drive, I'm your crew. Clara laughed dryly. Perfect. A movie ending. Old woman leaves in the rain, old friend at the wheel. Maeve planted her hands on her hips. At least us old ones know how to steer our own lives, darling. Then to me, Ellie? I nodded. 10 minutes. I went to the room and lifted both suitcases. Ella reached to help. I told her, just turn on the light for me. Dorothy pushed the door open wider and followed, her gray eyes wet not only from rain. Downstairs, David and Clara stood like carved figures, one hewn from pride, the other from comfort. Each step down the stairs creaked, not a farewell tune, but a drumbeat. Dorothy whispered, Are you sure? Never sure. I smiled. Could you fetch Arthur's pocket watch for me? She nodded, vanished, returned, placed it in my hand. I held it a moment. The ticking was steady. Time waits for no one, but it never betrays those who dare to move. I passed David. He turned his face aside, muttering, Go then, but don't expect to come crawling back. I stopped, set the suitcase down, met his eyes. I don't expect that. I only hope one day you understand. Clara flicked her wrist. We're done here, Eleanor. One chapter ends, I said. Another begins. I opened the door. Wind slammed in. Rain stung my face with 1,000 cold needles. Beechwood Street glistened under the street lamps, long ribbons of yellow trembling in the puddles. Maeve whistled softly and opened the car. I dragged the cases to the step. Ella ran after me, tiny raincoat hood bouncing, trying to shelter me with her own coat. Too small for either of us, but warm in the heart. Grandma, she grabbed my hand. Can I visit you? I cupped her face between my palms. Anytime you wish. I'll send you the address. I love you. I love you too. Dorothy stepped out under the eaves. Eleanor, I'm sorry I said nothing that night. I should have. You spoke tonight, I said, embracing her quickly, firmly. That's enough for a beginning. Take care of her. Don't let us grown-ups teach her to forget herself. She nodded, eyes bright with tears. I wheeled the suitcases to the gate. Maeve grabbed one, stowed it in the boot, slammed it shut with a solid thump. All aboard, sailor. The sea's waiting. I slid into the passenger seat. Rain dripped from Maeve's scarf like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence. She started the engine. Headlights carved a narrow road through the downpour. I looked back at number 17. The dark frame. David's silhouette hanging like an exclamation mark. Clara a flash of steel by the kitchen light. Dorothy a clean handkerchief laid over a wound. Ella a tiny lamp glowing upstairs. I didn't wave. I just laid my palm over my heart, the way travelers salute themselves when leaving the shore. The car rolled forward. Static on the radio faded into a woman's voice announcing another women's march for equal pay. Maeve turned the dial down, eyes on the road. When we're old, Ellie, the young ones will ask, where were you when the world changed? I smiled into the dark, raindrops streaming down the glass like threads of light. I'll tell them. I was on a night road, leaving a house that wasn't mine anymore, to find one that was. Maeve chuckled. Sounds like something fit for a poem. No, I said softly. For truth. At the end of the street, I asked her to stop. She frowned. Don't tell me you're changing your mind. No, just one thing. From my bag, I took the house key, cold metal, heavy with habit. I rolled down the window, held it tight for a second, then dropped it into the gutter. It struck a stone with a bright chime, glimmered once under the streetlight, then vanished into the running water. Not foolish. There was a spare for the new owners tomorrow, but this one belonged to the life I'd just left. Done, I said. Carry on, Captain. Maeve shifted gears, and the Mini surged into the rain. We passed open shops still lit, a fishmonger's window, a glowing red phone box, a pub spilling laughter onto the street. London, 1968, alive and sleepless. Inside the car, silence. I thought of Arthur. What would he say? Maybe he'd frown that I steered my life without permission. Maybe he'd smile, knowing I'd endured enough. I didn't need an answer. Tonight, every old question was being washed clean. After a few turns, Maeve laughed softly. You know, Ellie, if this were a play, the audience would be on their feet. And in real life? In real life, you just did what your heart required. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Behind my lids, the Budleigh shore unfolded. Wetwood porch, white windows, a sliver of dawn. I saw myself lighting the stove, boiling tea, silence not from fear, but from fullness. Tomorrow, I murmured, I'll buy a lavender pot for the porch. Arthur promised to plant one once. I'll plant it myself. And I'll bring the cider, Maeve said. We laughed together. Rain drummed on the roof like an eager drummer keeping time. Headlights sliced the dark, yard by yard, as if the night were a real unwinding. Behind us, number 17 shrank into the rain, just a dot on the map of memory. Ahead, Devon wasn't yet visible, but it didn't need to be, for inside me, the sea had already begun to rise. I glanced into the rearview mirror. Ella was gone from the window by now. Perhaps she'd run upstairs, cried a little, then wiped her face and started a letter to me. I believed it. As for David, I didn't know. Some people learn through loss, some never do. But that lesson was no longer mine to teach. We turned onto the main road. Maeve flicked on the radio again. A low, husky female voice sang of women leaving old streets to find new harbors. Maybe I imagined it. But tonight, everything was on my side. I rested a hand on the suitcase, felt the rough twine against my skin. Real, solid, like the life taking shape around me. Ellie, Maeve said without looking over. Aren't you afraid that when morning comes, it'll all feel heavy again? I thought a moment, then shook my head. If it's heavy, at least it'll be the weight I chose to carry, not the one someone else hung around my neck. She nodded. Then that's enough. We drove on through the rain, carrying every word spoken and swallowed, every anger burnt out and cooled, every year that had built toward this single hour. The night wrapped around us like a coat. Rain slid down the windshield like patient hands. The wind showed the way. Somewhere ahead waited a small house, windows to the sea, porch waiting for lavender, stove waiting for tea. Somewhere ahead waited a new Eleanor Hart, not the woman allowed to exist, but the one who had signed her own permission slip. And that rainy night on Beechwood Street, the night everything seemed to break, was, in truth, the night the door finally opened. Mornings in the Bay Cottage always begin with blue-gray lights slipping through the curtains, the smell of salt, and the sound of waves striking the rocks like the sea's own heartbeat. I've lived here 15 days now. 15 days that have passed with startling speed, and yet, at the same time, stretched out as if I were relearning how to breathe, one measured breath at a time. I have a new routine. Each morning I wake, open the window, brew tea, and sit on the porch looking out at the sea. Sometimes I write a few lines in my notebook. Sometimes I write nothing at all, just sit, listen to the wind, and let my mind drift along the horizon. On the 16th day, I received the first letter. A cream envelope, a man's hand, slanted, firm, familiar. I didn't need to read the sender's name. I knew. David. I took it out to the porch, let the sun fall over the paper. The smell of old paper and ink mixed with the sea salt and made a scent I couldn't name, like the scent of a memory I hadn't yet decided to keep or burn. Mother, I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to write. Number 17 is empty now. The buyers have moved in. I hate walking past it. Clara says don't look, but I still look. I don't understand why you had to do it. But maybe I'm starting to. I miss you. I know you're angry, but if possible, I'd like to come see you. I promise no arguing, no debating. I just want to look at you once. David. I read it again and again, then folded it and placed it in the wooden box on the table. I didn't answer. Not yet. Not because of resentment, but because I wasn't ready to be pulled backward. You cannot learn to fly while you're still afraid of falling. In the afternoon, Maeve drove over. She came in carrying half a garden's worth of lavender and the tang of a sea breeze perfume. Good heavens, Ellie, this place looks like it stepped out of a Monet. Except Monet wasn't the one who had to scrub the floors. I laughed, handing her a cup of tea. We sat on the porch and listened to the surf. Maeve told London stories, protests in Trafalgar Square, women demanding fair employment. A group of female reporters had run a feature, The Unpaid Mothers of Britain. She said, "Ellie, if I send them your story, they'll run it on page 1. Woman leaves home, buys seaside cottage, and finds herself." I laughed, though the sound was low and rough. "No one would care, Maeve." "Then I'll care." She raised her cup. "I'll be the chronicler of your personal revolution." Revolution. She meant it as a tease, but it was the truest word. In London, women were fighting for freedom on paper. Here, I was practicing freedom in every breath. But at night, freedom doesn't always sleep. I was beginning to learn. Freedom isn't only breaking away from someone. It's facing yourself when there's no one left to blame. Some nights I lay in bed and listened to the wind hiss at the windows, and loneliness flowed in like tide water. No voices. No one asking, "Would you like tea, Mum?" No one waiting for me to come home. I missed, not David, exactly, but the mere presence of another human body beside mine, even if only to argue with. One evening at port, wind battered the panes. The waves sounded like they meant to leap the porch. I sat with a glass of cider by the fire. Outside, the sea was ink black, broken only by the cut of lightning. I caught myself thinking, have I been too reckless? Then I answered myself, no, only too real. By the hearth, as the coals reddened and dimmed, I lifted my notebook and wrote, "Freedom has no shape. It is the feeling of walking into a room without fearing who will ask where you've been. It is eating supper alone without guilt. It is rain that no longer scares you, because the storm inside has gone out." Next day, sun. I went down to the village for supplies. Mrs. Wells at the Seagull Cafe welcomed me with a laugh. "Eleanor, you look better today. Hair let down, eyes bright. What's your secret?" "I've come through a storm," I said. "Now the sky's clear." She chuckled. "Around here, everyone has a storm. I left my husband 5 years ago. He hit me. The day I walked, I took one suitcase and a china teacup. Now I've got this cafe. And peace." I asked. She nodded. "Peace is the only asset I'll never let anyone seize again." I sat there drinking tea with women like me. Women who no longer live to please anybody else. Their laughter rang through the room like a plain, deep chorus of freedom. I realized I was not alone. That afternoon, when I returned, another envelope lay under the door. A neater hand, not David's. I opened it. It was Ella. "Gran, I miss you very much. Dad is quiet and Mum is cross. But I think Dad is sorry. I heard him tell Aunt Dorothy he never thought you would really go. Gran, I understand why you did it. I want to grow up like you, brave enough to do what's right, even when people don't understand. When I'm on summer break, may I come visit? I promise to bring chocolate, and I'll help you plant the lavender. I love you, Ella." I laid the letter on my chest and closed my eyes. A warmth and ache rose together. The feeling you get only when you see a seed you've sown push up at last, even though the soil is still stony. I answered her that very day. "Dearest Ella, I am well. Each morning I drink tea and look at the sea and think of you. You may come any summer you wish. There's a little room here with a window to the bay, and I'll keep it for you. Never be afraid of being different. It's a sign you're living true. Love, Gran." I slipped the letter into its envelope and sealed it with purple wax. Dropping it into the post box at the top of the lane, I felt lighter. There are cords we cut and cords we tie again, and the cord between Ella and me, I will tie with love, not duty. That night the moon was bright. I sat on the porch and watched the sea. The waves shimmered like silver, gentle, persistent. Each one a reminder. Everything returns, but never quite the same. I knew David would write again. I knew that one day I might see him, not as mother and son, but as two people who have weathered their own storms and are grown enough to admit their faults. But not today. Today, I chose quiet. Because sometimes silence is the only way to keep your freedom. At dawn the next morning, I woke as the first light crept in. The sea lay smooth, as if there had never been a storm. I brewed tea, opened the door, and found a small lavender pot set on the porch. Someone had left it at first light. A tiny card read, "Welcome to Devon, to the new woman. From the women of the Seagull Cafe." I laughed, and then I cried. A strange kind of tears, not bitter or salty, but light enough to blow away on the wind. I set the lavender on the step, the very spot where I'd told Maeve. Arthur once promised to plant it for me. And this morning, I planted it with my own hands. That afternoon, the sky was the color of lead. The waves weren't high, but they were dense and heavy, like the breath of an old animal. Salt thickened the damp air. I was sitting by the door with a cup of tea when I heard a car stop at the gate. A strange sound. Not Maeve's, not Mrs. Wells's, nor anyone else from the village. I frowned, set down the cup, and stepped onto the porch. Through the purple lavender, I saw a man standing motionless in a thin rain, dark coat, a small suitcase in hand. David. I wasn't shocked, perhaps because I had always known this day would come. But when I saw him, my heart still gave a small twist, as if an old wound had felt the sea wind. He stood there a few seconds, then stepped toward the gate. "Mother." Softly, I said, "Come in, or you'll be soaked." He hesitated. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me. If I didn't, you wouldn't be hearing my voice." I smiled faintly. He pushed the gate and came in. The rain thickened, drumming the roof. I handed him a towel. He wiped himself absently and let his eyes move over the cottage. White walls, wooden floor, the small table by the window, a vase of pale lavender. Everything was peaceful and strange to him. "Nothing like London," he said, voice husky. "Different," I said, "but it's the peace I chose." He nodded and sat, hands interlaced, wet from the rain. I poured him tea. When I passed the cup, he looked at me a long moment. "You've gotten thinner." I smiled. People who live alone often eat less, but think more. Silence. Only the small pendulum clock knocking time on the wall. "I didn't set out to come, Mother," he said at last. "I just wanted to see you." "I know. I thought you hated me." I put the cup down and met his eyes. "No, David. I don't hate you. I simply stopped sacrificing myself for you. Those are not the same thing." He lowered his head, silent. Wind worried the windows. The curtains lifted. I rose to pull the casement in. When I turned back, his eyes were red. "I don't know how to begin, Mother." "Then don't begin with 'I'm sorry.'" "But I owe you." "You owe yourself, not me. You need to learn to live without treating other people's love as a given." My words were light, but in the small house they echoed like surf on a cliff. He bit his lip, his shoulders shook once. "I just thought you'd always be there." Every child thinks that, until the mother walks out the door. A drop fell from the eaves and burst on the pane. I saw not the boy in my memory, nor yet the fully grown man, someone between, learning how to love again, this time in the right way. "Is Clara still in London?" I asked. "She's gone. After the sale, she moved back with her mother. Called me an idiot. Do you think she's right?" He shrugged, gaze drifting. "I don't know, but for the first time I feel hollow. The house empty, your voice gone, no smell of tea. That's when I understood what I'd lost." I sighed, neither sad nor reproachful. "Loss is the costliest form of education, David. Do you forgive me?" Forgiveness isn't something I carry around to distribute. It arrives on its own when a heart is calm enough. I wasn't angry, so there's nothing to forgive. He looked at me a long time, then let out a small, choked laugh. "You still sound like a philosophy don." I'm only the last woman on Beechwood Street who still knows how to say the truth. We both laughed. The laughter was cracked but genuine, like the rain easing. In the evening, I cooked a simple meal, grilled mackerel, boiled potatoes, and mint tea. He ate little, but quietly. I didn't pry. I wouldn't turn supper into a tribunal. Afterward, he stood to wash the dishes, something he had never done in my presence. "Leave them," I said. "I'll do it." "No. I need to learn." I nodded and watched. His hands were clumsy, water splashing, but warmth spread in me. Small acts sometimes hold 100 words that can't be said. When everything was clean, he leaned on the sink and looked at me. "Isn't it lonely, living alone like this?" "It is. But it's peaceful. And peace is sometimes better than joy." "I don't deserve you." "You don't have to deserve me. You only have to understand." He was quiet a long time, then nodded slightly, eyes down. "One last question, Mother." "Yes." "If you could go back to that night, would you still leave?" I smiled. "Yes. But I'd take an umbrella." He barked a laugh, free and honest enough that I had to laugh too. For a moment, there was no blame, no right or wrong. Just two people who had loved each other the wrong way and were learning again from the beginning. Night settled. I made up the front room for him. Outside, the sea murmured. Damp wind threaded the doorframe. Laying the last blanket on the bed, I heard him say softly, "Thank you, Mother." "For what?" "For letting me cross your threshold." I turned and looked at him. "This door opens to anyone who knows how to knock." He smiled and bowed his head. Good night, Mother. Good night, David. I turned off the lamp and left a small candle burning. Its light danced on the wall, as if the cottage itself sighed in relief. I stepped onto the porch and watched the night sea. The waves kept their rhythm. A pale moon showed through cloud. I knew that in the morning he might go. He might stay another day. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I no longer feared the sound of a knock. Inside, I heard him turn over. The wooden bed creaked. A small sound, but in me it rang like the first note of a reconciliation. Quietly I spoke. To myself, to the sea, to the women learning to stand. Some children take a lifetime to learn their mothers aren't saints. And some mothers must leave so their children can learn to love again. A wave hit the rocks and burst white as blossom. I closed my eyes. No more pain. Only a warm salt at the corner of my mouth. That night, the sea did not sleep, but I, at last, was at peace. At sunrise, I woke to light through the curtains. The sea was a gentle turquoise, the small chop flickering as if the night's storm had never been. I heard footsteps in the kitchen below. At first I thought it was wind. Then I heard the kettle sing, the soft clink of crockery on the wooden table. I pulled on a robe and went out. David was at the stove in a white shirt with sleeves rolled high, hair tousled. He turned, slightly startled. "You're up." I'm making breakfast. I thought you'd never set foot in a kitchen." "I'm learning. Last night you said loss teaches fast." "I believe you." On the table, 2 plates of toast, butter, a few slices of apple, and the teapot. I let out a small laugh. "Looks the part. I read it in a magazine. How to make breakfast for your mother. And you implemented it once. That is unusual. First time I've done the right thing without being told." We sat. Sunlight through the window warmed the room. I poured tea. Steam rose. "It's really quiet here," he said. "You can almost hear the waves as a heartbeat." "Exactly. Slower than London. Easier to breathe. Do you like this much quiet?" "I do, because no one uses their voice to claim a larger share of someone else's life." He nodded, saying nothing. I saw a softer light in his eyes, so different from the hard look he wore at number 17. After breakfast, I suggested, "Walk? The sea's beautiful this morning." He hesitated. "You don't mind?" "If I still minded you, I wouldn't have let you sleep here." He smiled a little and stood. We took the narrow path down to the sand. The lavender on either side had pushed a few new blooms. The wind brought the smell of young grass. Gulls wheeled white in the distance. I heard my son sigh, lightly, like a child. "You know, when I was small I used to wish I could go to the seaside with Dad. But he died early, and you were afraid to leave the city. I never saw the sea until today." I smiled. "Now you're looking at it. Not late. Only right on time for eyes that are open. I think, if Dad were alive, he'd understand you better than I do." "Perhaps. But your father would still have needed a lifetime to understand me." We went a few more steps. Water lapped our ankles, cold, pleasant. I lifted my hem and pressed my feet into the sand, soft, real. David looked at me and laughed. "I've never seen you this happy. Because I never lived the way I wanted. Now I do. And me, what should I do?" I looked out across the water and spoke slowly. "Stop looking for someone to mother you instead of yourself. Start with you. You don't need to be a good boy or pay debts. Just live decently." He was quiet. The wash of waves came and went, leaving 2 parallel lines of prints, his and mine. At noon I took him to the Seagull Cafe. Mrs. Wells was wiping a table. At sight of me she called out, "Eleanor." "Oh, and this must be my son David." "Oh, so you're the one who made your mother leave London, are you?" she boomed, without a trace of scolding. David flushed. "Yes, I suppose so." She clapped his shoulder. "Lucky for you she did. Now she's the best thing to happen to this village." The cafe laughed. The sound spread like small ripples. I glanced at David. He laughed, too, for once without awkwardness. "You have a lot of friends, Mother." "Yes. People here prefer honesty to manners." We took the window table and ordered 2 teas and apple pie. Outside, sunlight spread gold over the bay. Tea, baked apples, and salt air mingled, and for the first time the past came back without pain. I watched David take the first bite. He closed his eyes and nodded slightly. "Really good." "Good because you're hungry, or because you're learning to feel?" "Both." In the afternoon, I walked him around the village, the small quay, the second-hand bookshop, the old lighthouse on the hill. On the way back, we stopped on the cliff above the bay. The wind blew hard. My hair flew. David reached to steady my scarf. Mother. Yes. Do you regret leaving me? I looked far out where the waves broke white on rock. No. If I'd stayed, I wouldn't be me. I'd be the shadow of someone who once existed. He nodded, slow. I see. Maybe, sometimes you have to go so that people will learn to value you. I turned and laid a gentle hand on his shoulder. If that's what I've taught you, then every loss was worth it. Evening brought a soft shower. Devon's rain isn't loud like London's. It's like someone tapping gently at the glass. We sat in the kitchen under warm yellow light and read Ella's letter together. She wrote that summer break was coming, and Dad says I might visit Gran. At that line, David looked up. I promised her. If you agree, I'll bring her next month. I nodded. Of course. This house has room for both of you. He smiled, truly. I think Ella will love this sea. She takes after her mother, but her heart is like yours when you were small, full of dreams. Don't let grown-ups' fears rub them out. I won't. I looked at my son, no longer a stranger, but a man learning tenderness. His eyes held a warmth I hadn't seen in years. For the first time there was no anger, no pride. Only love, plain and honest. Late that night, while I was tidying the kitchen, David stepped close, took the cup from my hand, and said in a low voice, Mother, I don't know the right words, but thank you for not locking your door. I smiled and answered softly. You know, I once thought I had to close the door to live in peace. But peace isn't solitude. It's opening the door to the right people. He nodded, eyes wet. Then slowly he hugged me, for the first time in over 20 years. Not hard, not dramatic, just the arms of a son who had finally grasped that love can be silent and still never go away. I patted his back as I used to when he was small. There now, David. I'm not a ghost. You needn't cry like that. He laughed, hoarse. I'm just relieved. That's enough. When he slept, I went out to the porch and watched the rain. Far off, the lighthouse drew slow bands of light across the water. The sound of the waves, once the sound of leaving, had become a lullaby. I thought of Arthur, of Ella, of Clara and Dorothy. Each had left a fragment in me, but all together they made the present tense Eleanor Hart, the woman who needs no pity, only the right to live true. I sipped what was left of my tea and wrote. Today my son washed dishes, made toast, and laughed. The sea is the same, but the waves are gentler. Perhaps because the storm inside me is gone. At dawn the sky cleared. I saw David already up, walking the curve of the bay. From a distance, his figure stood on the sand, hands in his pockets, looking out, someone practicing peace with himself. I stood on the porch and smiled. The sea flashed bright, the waves kept their rhythm, and the wind carried the scent of new lavender. I didn't call him back. I knew that at last, we owed each other nothing. The sea was oddly serene this morning. The surface lay flat as a mirror, throwing back the first bright light of July. I was pegging white sheets along the porch rail when a car horn floated up from the bottom of the steep lane. I set the basket down and smiled. I knew that horn, hurried and flustered at once, like the heart of someone stepping into life for the first time. Grant, Ella's voice rang out, bright as a lark. I turned, and in the glittering light she came running, wind-tossed blonde hair, a dress sprinkled with wild daisies, flying around her legs. She hugged me so tightly I had to step back. I missed you so much. I missed you too. You look like summer sunshine, Ella. Dad said the sea here is beautiful, but I didn't think it would be this beautiful. I laughed and slipped an arm around her shoulders. Welcome to your grandmother's heaven. David didn't come with her. He only sent a letter ahead. I'll let Ella come on her own. She needs to learn to go by herself the way you taught me. Thank you for everything. One short line, but enough to tell me the wound had closed. The house lit up differently with her in it. She went everywhere, opened every door, touched everything, ran onto the porch, and squealed at the wall of lavender. You planted so many. Friends gave them. I only looked after them. May I cut some to take into my room? If you promise not to make them sad, I'll say thank you before I pick them. I smiled. That simple sentence took me straight back to myself as a girl. The same words I once said to my mother. It turns out the kindest things can travel 3 generations, so long as one person chooses to keep them. In the afternoon, I took Ella down to the village. The women at the Seagull Cafe were at our usual table. Mrs. Wells spotted us and waved. Eleanor. And who's this? My granddaughter, Ella. Goodness, she's the spit of you. Only younger, brighter, and certainly better at kind words than the menfolk. The table roared, and Ella laughed along. I ordered her milk tea and apple pie. She listened as the older women talked about food prices, about politics, about how the Village Women's Guild had just sent a petition for equal voting rights on the council. Ella's eyes widened. Do women here fight too, Gran? Mrs. Wells smiled. We fight, darling, but with teaspoons and persistence. I looked at Ella. Her eyes shone as if she were seeing something sacred. Gran, in London people say strong women end up lonely. Here it feels different. I squeezed her hand. Here, strong women are loved because they don't ask permission to be themselves. That evening we sat together on the porch. A round moon, the sea silver as silk. A salty breeze moved through the lavender until the whole air smelled softly sweet. Ella pillowed her head on my lap and whispered, Gran, do you ever miss the old house? I stroked her hair. Yes, but only the way one misses a room one once lived in, no longer home. I miss that room, where you told me fairy tales. But I like it better here. You laugh more here. Then I shall stay a very long time, so I can laugh with you. She lay quiet a moment, then murmured, Gran, there's something I want to tell you. I looked down. Moonlight traced her face, clear, with a shade of sorrow. Mother is thinking of separating from Dad. My hand paused. Do you know why? She says he's changed. Not selfish anymore, but far away. She says, you woke him up, Gran, but you also made her realize she'd never stop to look at herself. I was silent. At last I said, sometimes when one person changes, the other no longer knows where to stand. But it's all right, Ella. Change is part of growing. She nodded, gaze reaching outward. I think Mum needs to come here, the way Dad did. When she's ready, this door is open. Next morning we went down to the shore early. Ella gathered shells. I drew on the sand. What are you drawing? She asked. A circle. I think a life is a circle. However far we go, we return to where we started, only with a different heart. Like you coming back to yourself, but stronger? Like you learning to love yourself before you love anyone else. She smiled, then scratched a little lopsided shape next to my circle. And this is me. A star. No, a wing. So when you're tired, I'll fly around you. I laughed, and my eyes filled again, not with sadness, but with a quiet happiness I once thought I'd lost. That afternoon a shower came down. We stayed in the kitchen and baked an apple pie. Butter, flour, and cinnamon filled the house, and I remembered years gone, when I baked for David, for Arthur. But today was different. No pressure, only joy. While Ella stirred batter, she asked, Gran, if you hadn't left back then, do you think you'd still be this happy? No. Happiness isn't just people around you. It's being you around other people. She fell silent, then said, I want to remember that for the rest of my life. Outside, the rain thinned and the wind shifted. Drops gathered on the porch roof and fell, glittering like glass. I looked at Ella and saw the future, not bound by fear or sacrifice, but born of freedom and understanding. That night I wrote in my book. This summer, my granddaughter arrived. She brought youth's laughter and a message from the future. The little house is no longer only mine. It is where the women of my family find each other again. Someday, when I leave this world, the surf will go on and the lavender will bloom. And perhaps, in Ella's laughter, I will live again, as a fragment of the freedom I passed on. Late, when Ella slept, I went out to the porch. The moon rose over a calm Devon sea. The breeze fingered the curtains like breathing. I thought of Clara, my daughter-in-law, a woman who had never truly been allowed to be herself. I made myself a promise. If she comes one day, I won't teach her to be strong. I'll show her how to be gentle without losing herself. Because this changing world still needs more women who can bend without breaking. I looked up and saw a falling star. Softly, as if sending a note to Arthur, to the past, to myself, I said, Do you see, Arthur? At last, this sea is quiet, and I have found home. The wind carried the lavender's scent, and somewhere in the waves I seemed to hear him laugh. That afternoon, the Devon sky grew thick with cloud. A hard wind came, smelling of salt and sand. Ella and I were picking small stones along the bay when an engine cut on the dirt lane behind the house. The sound was so familiar my heart tightened before I turned. Clara. The car door opened. She stepped down, tall, hair wound tight, a light coat, a tired face. She didn't look around. She only stood a moment, as if practicing how to breathe. I set the basket down. Ella turned, eyes round. Mom! She flew to Clara and folded her up. I didn't move. Not from fear, but because I knew everything that needed saying would have to grow out of this first silence. Clara smoothed Ella's hair, her voice rough. I didn't plan to come, but then I started to drive and couldn't stop. Ella took her hand and tugged her toward me. Gran's here, Mom. Everyone's here now. When only a few steps remained between us, Clara stopped. Her eyes were still proud, but rimmed red from too many sleepless hours. Hello. Hello. Clara, I said as gently as the wind. The gust tugged at her hair. She lowered her head. I don't know where to begin. Begin with what brought you here. David says he found peace here. I wanted to see what it looks like. I smiled a little. Peace has no shape, Clara, but you can feel it if you're quiet long enough. She was quiet. Wind whistled along the eaves. The surf answered in long pulses. Ella clung to her hand, watching the two women she loved most, afraid to break the spell. We went inside. I made tea. Little was said. The lavender scent folded into Earl Grey and filled the space between the three of us. Clara set her cup down and laced her fingers. You know, when you left, I said I hated you. I said you were selfish, that you'd ruined the family. I nodded. I know. But then, living with David in a house without your voice, I understood. There are presences you see only when they disappear. Her voice shook. I didn't interrupt. She went on, slowly, one word at a time. I thought I was strong. I thought marrying a gentle, hard-working man would be enough. But I only wanted to be seen. Like David wanted to be seen by you. I looked down into my cup. The steam was as frail as the old years. No one is strong when she lives to be seen, Clara. Strength is seeing yourself, even if no one else does. She raised her eyes, wet. I don't know how to see myself anymore, Eleanor. I've lost too much. I set my hand on the table. Then start again, from where you are. No one lives without losing. What matters is we do not lose forever. She fell silent. A tear struck the wood. Ella sat between us, eyes shining, listening to a language only the wounded understand. After a while we went back to the porch. The sea had begun to stir. Gray cloud tore to show a thin blade of light along the horizon. Clara looked out, hair blown back, a face left bare, thin and resolute. I remember being afraid of you when we first met. Your silence made me feel small. I always thought you were judging me. No, Clara, I wasn't judging. I was sad to see you live as if you had to apologize for existing. She laughed, but the laugh was wet. Now I see. You didn't run away. You saved yourself. And by doing it, you saved this family. I didn't answer. I watched the sea, wave upon wave meeting and falling back, like people who can touch but never keep. Ella asked softly, Mom, Gran, will you stay close to each other? Clara knelt and hugged her. If Gran agrees, I'd like to stay a few days. I nodded. This house has room for 3. That evening, 3 generations of women shared a table for the first time. No tension, no cold silence. Only the click of light cutlery, flashes of laughter, and pauses as gentle as breathing. I looked at the two in front of me, a young girl and a woman learning to love herself again, and felt I had come the long road through. Clara glanced around the cottage and murmured, You've made this place a real home. No, a home isn't built by walls. It opens when hearts open. Today, we opened that door. Ella clapped her hands. Then our house has 3 women again. We laughed. The sound filled the little kitchen like a strange, familiar tune, the music of forgiveness. Night fell. Clara stepped onto the porch, and I followed. Cloud hid half the moon, but there was light enough to see the sea gleam. She said quietly, Eleanor, I don't know if I can start over, but I want to try. I don't want Ella to grow up thinking she must choose between love and freedom. I laid a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to choose. True freedom never opposes love. It only opposes fear. She was silent, then nodded. I understand. Thank you for teaching me what no school teaches. I smiled. I didn't teach. I simply walked first, so you wouldn't get lost. A breeze came through, and lavender and salt braided together. I knew then the little seaside house, once the emblem of solitude, had become a meeting place for mending. Next morning, laughter woke me. Clara was teaching Ella to arrange flowers. Both of them bent over, hair loose, sunlight on their shoulders. I stood at the door and watched them. 2 women, 2 generations, and I saw myself in both. David once asked me, if you could live again, would you do it differently? I think the answer now is no. Because without that rainy night departure, there would be no morning like this. 3 generations of women under one roof, owing nothing, loving freely. In the afternoon, we went down to the sea. The 3 of us held hands and walked the sand. The waves lapped our ankles, cold, pleasant. Above us a flock of gulls crossed, white wings flashing in the sun. 3 generations of the hearts. Ella cried. To be precise, Clara laughed. 3 generations of heart women who refused to be quiet. I smiled and squeezed their hands. And that is how we stay alive. The water curled around our feet and drew our footprints into one long chain. When it slid back, the prints held for a while, as if the sea itself wanted to keep something of 3 women who had learned to forgive. That night I wrote. Today Clara came. We did not cry. We looked at each other and understood. Some apologies need no words. They're already written in the eyes. Once I feared that leaving would make me vanish. But when we dare to step out of the dark, we leave light for those who walk behind. The sea still calls, the wind still sings. And I, Eleanor Hart, have finally come home. This morning the sea was so calm I could hear myself breathe. A light wind, a veiled sky. The lavender on the porch had just finished a 3rd bloom. I carried a chair to the door and set a small notebook across my knees. The cover was soft with wear, page edges yellowed, a corner speckled with sea salt. On the cover I wrote, my hand unsteady, The Nameless Seasons of the Sea, memoir of a woman who lived to make sure she could still breathe. It's been nearly 2 years since I left London. 2 years since that rainy beachwood night when I thought I was simply leaving, when in truth I was coming home. Devon has changed color with every season. In spring, lavender grows and purples the porch. In summer, the waves are a lullaby. In autumn, the wind carries apples ripening. In winter I light the stove, pour tea, and listen to the wind drum the wooden frame like time knocking, reminding me I'm still here, still alive, still free. David has moved to Exeter for work. He comes most weekends with jars of jam he's made and a warm smile. He brings no guilt anymore, only the quiet of someone who understands. Clara stayed in London, but she visits at times. Between us there is no apology now, only small talk, weather, flowers, food, and the kind of laughing 2 women do without remembering why. Ella is growing faster than time. She writes every month. In her latest letter she said, Gran, we've been assigned an essay on someone who inspires me. I chose you, but I didn't write that you left home. I wrote that you found home where there were no walls, only wind and sea. I read it, folded it, and smiled. Not out of pride, but because I knew. She had seen what took me a lifetime to learn. Today I felt a bit tired. I sat a long time, the breeze moving through my gray hair. The little pendulum clock inside kept steady time. In the kitchen, the kettle murmured. I opened the notebook and wrote. I used to fear getting old, thinking old meant being left behind. Now I know old is when one is gentle enough to stop, to look at one's life without resentment. I added, if one day I leave, remember I'm not gone. I've simply joined the sea. Every wave that comes ashore is a greeting. Every breath of wine through the lavender is a touch. I'll be there, not as someone lost, but as a piece of the calm I once sought. The sun climbed. I stood and walked the house, touching each thing. Maeve's scarf, Wells's vase, Arthur's old cup. Everything held a breath of someone, a memory, a span of life. Nothing was meaningless, not the scratch on the table, not the hinge slightly off its frame. I remembered what Maeve once said. A happy house doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs cracks big enough for light to come through. I smiled and understood. Devon was the crack in my life. At noon Ella called. Her voice bubbled. Gran, I just got the women's scholarship. They asked why I chose sociology, and I said, because I want to know why women apologize when they've done nothing wrong. I laughed. Bravo, my girl. Do you still apologize a lot? Only when I spill tea. But if I'm right, I hold my head up. Then I'm at peace. Gran, when will you come up to London? I watch the glitter on the water. When the wind blows the other way. But I might send the wind ahead of me. She laughed. Okay, send the wind, and I'll catch it. We hung up. I listened to the waves, like a heartbeat. That was enough. I needed nothing else. Toward evening the light turned gold. I set the notebook on the table and went out to the porch. The sea shone, the surface winked silver. I settled in the old chair, the teapot still steamed. Far off, the lighthouse blinked, the breeze tapped the curtains. Softly, to myself, I said, in the end, life isn't for waiting to be understood, but for understanding why we ever waited. I closed my eyes. Wave, wind, heartbeat, braided into one. Peace spread over me, light as a hand on my shoulder. Old pains dissolved like salt in water. That night, Devon lay under the moon. Villagers passing the little cottage saw the lamp still lit, the door ajar, a teacup still warm. On the table, the notebook lay open. The last page carried a slanted but steady hand. If anyone asks what I lived for, I'll say, so that in the end I could love myself for no reason at all. Eleanor Hart, Devon, 1970. Next morning, Clara and Ella arrived. The house was still full of light. On the porch, the sea wind tossed the lavender. Ella picked up the notebook, tears falling though her mouth still smiled. Gran hasn't gone anywhere, Mom. Clara nodded softly. She's only gone back to the sea, darling. They sat together and looked out over the bay where light and water melt into one long silver band. The waves came in, steady, patient, kind. Listened closely, and they seemed to whisper a name. Eleanor. Eleanor. It's been 20 years since my grandmother left. 20 years since that still morning in 1970 when the Devon Sea lay like glass and my mother said, "Your gran is only taking a longer walk." I was 17 then. Too young to grasp the phrase, a peaceful passing. Too green to know how to stay without losing. I'm 37 now. I live in Gran's very house, the whitewashed cottage with the brown-tiled roof, set on the slope facing the sea. I've fixed a few things, but I've kept the wooden table where she wrote, the old lavender-scented curtains, and the wicker chair where she watched the sunsets. Devon is the same today, warm, quiet, untouched by the world's hurry. Perhaps that's why, whenever I open the window, I hear her voice moving in the wind, light but clear. Ella, don't apologize for living true to your heart. After Gran died, my mother, Clara, came here for a long while. At first she hardly spoke. She watered flowers and sat on the porch for hours. I think she was talking with Eleanor in her own way. Then one day she began to keep a journal again, not to rewrite the past, but to continue the pages Gran hadn't finished. She wrote about the world of women after Eleanor, about mothers who learned to stop, about daughters brave enough to begin. In 1975, my mother joined the National Women's Organization. She became an advocate for the right to choose a profession, to work, and to rest. At her first speech in London, she ended with a line that brought the room to silence. I learned from my mother-in-law that freedom is not the right to keep walking, but the right to stop when you wish. The press printed it, and people began to ask, who is she? The answer always makes me proud. She is the daughter-in-law of Eleanor Hart, the woman who chose the sea as her home. I followed sociology, just as Gran encouraged. And somehow, I don't know when, I became a lecturer, standing to speak about equality, self-respect, and dignity. Students ask me, why do you speak about women as if you were speaking about a faith? I smile and say, because one woman taught me that loving yourself is the holiest act. Whenever I say it, I remember Gran's hand, shaking with age, steady as she wrote her last line. If anyone asks what I lived for, I'll say, so that in the end I could love myself for no reason at all. Today I sit where she sat. The sea is quiet. On the table is a small wooden box of old letters. I still haven't opened them all. My mother gave them to me before she died and said only, open these when you're old enough not to cry for missing her, but to smile for being grateful. I opened the box. Inside were letters Gran wrote to me, never sent. The paper is browned. The slanted script wavers, but holds. I read the first. Ella, if you're reading this, I've likely folded into the sea. I don't want you to pity my past. I only want you to know that every woman lives two lives. One lived for others, and one that begins when she dares to live for herself. I regret only one thing, that I cannot stand beside you to watch you step into your second life. I folded it, tears falling, my mouth smiling. She didn't know, my second life began the day she left. I took another. Don't fear loneliness, Ella. Loneliness kills no one. It simply teaches us how to speak with our own soul. When you can sit alone and feel at peace, you've grown older than your years. I looked up at the sea. Dusk. The sky spread like blush on a petal. The waves breathed. I could almost see her sitting beside me, eyes kind and bright. That evening I lit a candle and opened my own notebook. I wrote the first line, picking up where she left off. The name Seasons of the Sea by Ella Hart. Gran, if you can read this, I want you to know every seed you planted has flowered. My mother, Clara, lived fully and left gently. I have loved, failed, stood again, and never forgotten your lessons. Devon still smells of lavender. The sea breaks on the shore as it did when you smiled your last. I believe when the wind comes through the window, it's you returning, sitting in the old chair, sipping tea, and whispering. We lived well. Grant, I'm learning that too. The wind blew out the flame. I didn't relight it. In the dark the sea shone, phosphorescence drifting like 1,000 stars afloat. Softly, I sent a message on the wind. Thank you, Eleanor Hart, for teaching 3 generations of our women to be free without apologizing. A wave struck hard, and the foam burst white. I heard her laugh somewhere in the gust. Not far, not near, just close enough to know she was still here.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. See you again.